station in talk radio, Liberty Talk Radio, where the critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. Today, we are absolutely pleased and honored to have back as our guest Tracy Lawson. Tracy is an author of the book Counteract, and most recently, her new book called Resist. She's a fascinating and compelling writer who risks probing into our future in contemporary language that is absolutely mind-provoking, but somewhat disturbing. However, we need this as we are lulled into believing everything that we hear, especially now that we have the presidential election coming and whoever we elect is going to make everything utopia all over again, you know. And we get this every 4 years, well, every election cycle, whatever it may be. And we're really lulled into believing that, don't worry, they have everything under control. Everything will be fine. You just sit back, relax, just work, and pay us a good portion of your wages, and we'll protect you. Now, this novel sort of breaks that paradigm, which is very disturbing, but unfortunately, it's very truthful. It's a novel. It's not, you know, it's not factual. It's a novel, but you can sense that this is exactly where we are going, and I think Tracy really captures that in literary form that is interesting, exciting to read, but also somewhat perturbing, you know. Tracy, during our live broadcast, we do invite you to call 646-652-4620. Press the 1 button if you want to ask a question or make a comment during a live broadcast only. All right? Tracy, thank you so much for being on our program.
Thanks, Joe. It's great to be here.
Yeah, well, it's great seeing you again, but I miss you.
I really last time. I'm so glad to be back on the show again.
That's great. Well, you look great. Well, Tracy, for the sake of our audience, would you give us a sort of a recap, a summary of the book Resist, and then work into the book Counteract? Counteract, and then the book Resist. I'm sorry, I had it backwards. Resist. And then we want to talk a little bit about why did you think this way? I mean, I think there's more behind it than just you like to write and it sounds like an interesting story. And I'm guessing at that, but I'll let you answer that question later on.
Sure, absolutely. It only makes sense to summarize both books because now we're on the verge of having the third book come out in the series. So Great. Another reason to come back on your show next year, hey?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. Well, let me start off with Counteract. Now, Counteract is a young adult dystopian book, but I find it has a lot of crossover appeal to adults who are interested in freedom themes and liberty and who like an exciting action story. The tagline on Counteract is, who do you trust when your world unravels and everything you believed is a lie? Okay, in this futuristic world, and it's set in the not too distant future in 2034, we have the Office of Civilian Safety and Defense that has been created to oversee everything that has to do with domestic security and safety. Now, it started off as an anti-terrorism, watch group and everything, but it's become an administrative group. And so now they've created all these things called civilian restrictions. My protagonists are 18-year-olds, college freshmen, and they've grown up in a world where there's no social media, no one's allowed to gather in public places or attend concerts or sporting events, and only a small select group of adults have the privilege to drive because it's a small price to pay for safety. They've even outlawed things like grocery stores, all in the name of safety. Okay, so with these children growing up in this circumstance where they're told all the time, you're on the verge of dying from terrorism, let us protect you, they grow up and they accept it. Now, the day our story opens, a new and more deadly terrorist threat looms, and it's an airborne chemical weapons attack that can be set off without warning. The OCSD says, don't worry, people, we are ready. We knew this was coming. We've got an antidote. All you got to do is take 3 drops a day and you'll be safe. Okay? So, of course, they're terrified. They believe that this is what they need to stay safe. And so they line up and they wait in line and they get their antidote and they take their antidote. Now, Tommy and Corrine, of course, are among them. And they don't even stop taking the antidote when weird things start to happen. But the day the disaster sirens signal the dreaded real attack, Tommy and Corinne meet, and he shares his last dose with her, even though doing so could hasten his own death. Now, obviously, they don't die, because then it would be a very short book.
Right.
But when they realize, I'll let the readers figure out how this happens, but once they realize, hey, wait a minute, we're out of this stuff, yet we're still here, and they're saying that people are dying all around us, then they think, well, maybe we ought to dig a little deeper and try and figure out what's going on here. And they end up making contact with an underground resistance group, and they kind of go on this quest to expose the truth. Okay, and there's a great big, wonderful action scene, which I really loved writing. I really loved writing and did a little flow chart to make sure that I kept all the details in order and everything. And it ends on a bit of a cliffhanger with, a daring escape. And then off we go into the second book. And the second book is Resist. And it came out last year. So I'll give you a little summary of that one. Knowledge comes with a price, because now Tommy and Corinne are not just naive teenagers who believe everything the government tells them. They don't believe that the Office of Civilian Safety and Defense is really got their best interests at heart. So they've made their escape to find this resistance group in a remote mountain headquarters, and they are going to join the fight against the OCSD. But they find that this is not their utopia either, because being part of the resistance brings with it a whole new set of challenges, because you've got a bunch of rebels, and they're rebellious, and they all have their own ideas about how they want things done. So the resistance can't work together either. You've got all this infighting, and you have their plans to spark a revolution go awry. There's all kinds of things that go wrong. There's jealousy, there's infighting, and Tommy and Corinne's relationship is tested as they kind of decide they want to fight in different ways. And we can talk a little bit more about the characters and how they differ, because, they kind of came together pretty quickly. They started to rely on each other. They developed a really quick relationship. And then when you start to get to know somebody, you're like, well, wait a minute, you don't think like I do about this? And so the whole second book is about starting how teenagers might be infatuated with somebody and then go, wait, we don't agree on this and we don't agree on that. Let's see where we can find some common ground.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. Now, I guess this would be classified as a dystopian novel. Is that the right word?
Yes, absolutely. Because dystopia, my definition of dystopia is a twisted version of perfection. Yeah. Because a utopia is supposed to be perfect, and a dystopia looks really great on the surface until you scratch that surface. Right. Everybody's safe. Everybody goes home at the end of the day. Everybody's taken care of. The quadrant marshals watch over us, but we don't have any freedom and we don't have any privacy.
Yeah, but it's interesting. If you watch mainstream television, you get the exact opposite. The hero at the end. I mean, it hasn't changed in 70 years on television. The good guy comes in, he solves a problem, everyone goes home. And what I particularly reflect back on is you have series like Friends and movies, series like that, where you have young people who don't have jobs but are broke, but live in downtown Manhattan, where an apartment costs $5,000 a month. No one's working, or they're working at minimum wage jobs. They have this beautiful apartment, and they go out to eat every night at this trendy bar, and they're living a great life, but they can't find a job. And we get really lulled. And I think you see this now, where young people are coming out of college with degrees, as you hear all the time, degrees in worthlessness, can't find a job. They're not living in downtown Manhattan, in a beautiful apartment, with friends and going out to eat at fancy restaurants every night. They're living in their mom's basement, and they're living a miserable life. But we don't want to reflect that. Our mainstream television doesn't reflect the harsh realities of life. Your book, in a novelistic form, brings it out and say, hey, you better start thinking. This is not real. We recognize that, but this is the life that we are heading for, and this is partially the life that we're living in right now. Do I have that about right, or did I take the train off the tracks on that one?
No, you didn't go off the tracks too much. I tried to, like I said, I tried to write an exciting adventure story that would appeal to my audience, which would be teenagers, young adults. But I also, like you said, a little bit of common sense here. I thought that I was writing something that was way out, but then as I wrote, I would turn on the news and I'd be like, wait, they're stealing my stuff again. And things actually started to happen.
I hope you sued all of them,
that I could, it would be great. But yeah, you find that the things that you think are crazy that, people are starting to do, and things like eliminating cash and things like that. I don't know. I think I mentioned this last time, but that in the state of Louisiana, it is illegal to use cash in secondhand transactions.
Right. Yeah.
And like at a yard sale or a church bazaar, things like that, you can't purchase something with cash. And they say it's because it cuts down on tracking stolen goods. That, the exchange of stolen goods is easier to do when there's cash. Well, in my book, they've eliminated cash because they said it's too dangerous. Anybody could buy stuff that could be made into a bomb, and we just can't track it. But then they can track everything that you do. If the only way to get something is with your your government issued debit card.
Yeah. So
they're just like the tracking and all that stuff. And I don't make up any technology. I only use things that are already in existence. Like even the antidote. When I give talks at schools, I wear this vial, and I always ask the kids to guess what's in this. I said it's not really the antidote, because the antidote is something that's, gives everybody hallucinations and lulls them into a false sense of security. And they kind of guess. And I said, no, I couldn't bring LSD into your school. It's actually NyQuil or Dayquil, because it's photographed well. But the government did experiment with LSD as a truth serum back in the 50s. And scopolamine, they used it for women giving birth back in the 50s and 60s. They called it twilight sleep. You could follow directions, but you were hallucinating and you didn't remember what happened to you afterwards.
Right.
A couple of drops of that a day.
Yeah.
Why not, right?
Sounds good to me, I'll be honest with you. I need that more often,
Well, see, Joe, that's what the government counts on you thinking that's a good idea, because in the second book, when everybody starts to realize, hey, wait, we don't really need this, and we have that emperor's got no clothes on moment where we don't really need this, and then the government comes back with, I'm sure you're probably confused and you're probably a little bit unhappy now that you're not taking this anymore. So we're going to offer you a transitional dose just to help you ease back into reality.
Right.
Because they want you to take it. They want to get things back under control again.
Right.
And instead, things spiral even worse out of control because they're trying to force the dose back on people when they already know what it's about.
Yeah. Give us a comparison, or what is the government doing today that aligns with your book? Give us some examples.
Wow. Let's see. I had something in mind, and now, of course, it's slipped my mind. Let's see.
Well, for example, the war on terror. We have war on terror. We have war on a concept. So I have trouble with that. So of course we have, since with the war on terror, they can justify anything. I don't mean to cheat, but I mean that's when it comes to mind.
That's totally fine. I can run with that.
Okay.
When I wrote these books, I had a quote on my wall, and it said, naturally, the common people do not want war, not in America, not in England, nor for that matter in Germany. That is understood. But you can always bring the common people to the bidding of the leaders by saying that we are being attacked, and saying that people who oppose the government are unpatriotic and exposing us to danger.
Yeah.
Okay, now that was Hermann Goering during the Nuremberg trials.
Yeah.
But I would say that security theater and the pretense of we need all these security things in place where we don't really. I had one of my daughter's friends flew down, and I picked her up at the airport in Dallas, and she came out through security, and she doesn't fly all that often. And she said, well, it was a long line at security, but I felt better knowing that they were checking everybody. And I said, sweetheart, they miss 85, 90% of contraband that comes through. And I said, and then they wouldn't let you take your water bottle through, and they told you to throw it in the trash can right beside where everybody's lining up. In case it was a bomb, just throw it in the trash can over there. This does not make us safer. It just makes us think we're safer.
That's right.
And it lulls us into that sense of security. And I would say that's probably the best example of what's going on, because I ask a kid in classes all the time, I ask high school kids, how much safer are you now than you were in 2001, in 1999? And they don't have any clue. They don't have any comparison.
Yeah.
Because they were too young to understand.
I went to Mexico recently, and I never forget, they threw away my bottle of Listerine. I was so mad. I had to go to Mexico to buy a bottle of Listerine, and because I was allowed 16 fluid ounces, and this was 24 or something like that. It's a Listerine, it's the same thing. I just annoyed the heck out of me. I mean, it wasn't the money; it was the principle of it. It was so stupid. I said, well, you mean if this was a bomb and it was 16 ounces, it wouldn't blow up the plane, but 24 ounces is going to blow up the plane? It didn't make any sense whatsoever. But anyway, the things that the government does is it does create enemies that don't exist. They're all false flags, and then we have to fall in line. In your opinion, our involvement, for example, why we're involved in Eastern Europe and the Middle East is so far beyond me. I could never make the connection. But because of our involvement there, we have created more chaos, more antagonism, and now this is coming back to bite us. It always does. And yet the people in government are not stupid. I mean, they're selfish, mean, and rotten, but they're not stupid. And they know that this is creating problems. But every time a problem props up somewhere else in the globe, now it happens to be Europe, Eastern Europe, even now Western Europe, as well as the Middle East, we need government more to protect us from all of these antagonisms going on around the world, especially ISIS. And during the election, nearly everyone said the number one concern of America is ISIS. Number one, not problem, but the threat. The number one threat to America is ISIS. And I stood up and I yelled at the television set. Of course, everyone heard me. It says, no, the number one threat to our government is our country, is our own government. But more importantly, the way people think about our government. There's our real problem. What's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. The mantra that the government sells in my novels is it's a small price to pay for your safety. Every time they take something away, when they say, well, high security high schools are necessary. We're going to eliminate extracurricular activities. Yes, enrichment activities for kids are good, but it's not worth the risk. We're going to send them straight home after school, and they've got to go straight to their homes, and they'll be monitored there. Things like that. It's, what are we taking away? What opportunities for growth are we losing by curtailing people and taking away the sports and things like that? To me, that was akin to when they did the government shutdown, and the first thing they shut down is always the flagship thing that everybody wants, the tourist thing everybody wants to go see. It's the Washington Monument. When they need to save money, they shut down the Washington Monument, and everybody freaks out. Oh my gosh, they shut down the national parks. They shut down the Washington Monument. We were going on vacation this week. We were going to go there. They do that to get your attention.
Right.
And that's just the way it goes. And so they do the thing that will make you notice how much better they are saving you. And I have to also say, I have a friend who has a government job, and she's a young gal. She's, just out of college, has a government job, and she got furloughed for 2 weeks. And when she came back, she goes, well, now they're letting me work overtime to make it up, now that the government's got money again.
Money. The government has no money. It's $200 trillion in debt. How can I have any money? It's like saying I'm a millionaire, but I owe a few $1 billion. I love that. I think I'm losing my mind because none of this makes any sense. And what do you think about in context of writing this book? How do you view the elections? How does that fall into place somehow? Are there statements that we should be aware of in this election process that are reflected in your book?
Not necessarily this one, because these books that are already out, of course, were written a year or two ago. But I would say that in my evil villains in both of these books, there's two villains. There's two different directors of the OCSD during the course of the books, and they both seem to just be like Teflon. No matter what they do wrong, no matter what they say, no matter what scandals they're embroiled in, everybody just goes, oh, okay. And very few people really see, the forest for the trees and see that these people are just nothing but control freaks. And, you have to be really, really close to them. And we do get close because the story is told in multiple perspectives. So you'll see what's going on behind the scenes at the OCSD, and then you'll see what the resistance is up to. And the members of the resistance they're the only ones that really have a clue. And the rest of the people just kind of watch television and believe what people tell them. And, like for instance, the money being gone. Okay, so say, we have government issued debit cards, but some of the people in the resistance have stayed off the grid their whole lives. They've never registered. They've never signed up to go to school. They've homeschooled their kids out in the mountains of, of Kentucky and Tennessee. I figure, they're the descendants of bootleggers. They like to break the rules.
Right.
These are the core group here that has formed the resistance. And so if they need something, they barter for it. But there's a situation where a couple of the guys are headed out, and one of them has a can full of coins, and the other one goes, "Oh, I remember those. I find one every now and again in the coat pocket or, in the garage or whatever." And he's like, "Yeah." And so the other guy who's from the resistance is telling Tommy, the protagonist, how it came about that there are no coins anymore. And Tommy goes, "Well, what did the government do? Just say, like, give me all your money?" And Wes goes, "Oh, you're funny. Isn't that what they always say?" Yeah. And, and there was in the story, there was a time in which people were to turn all their cash in and it would be credited to their government debit accounts. And from that point on, everything was going to be electronic. You're going to get your paycheck electronically. Your health care would be deducted. Your food allowance would be deducted, and you swipe for whatever's left over. And but of course, when the program was more expensive than they realized it was going to be, your money was credited at only about 75% of what you actually deposited.
Right.
And so everybody lost money right away. But by then it was too late, and the money was already in, because it was always going to be more expensive than the government told you. And so I think that that's probably a parallel also. But of course, some of my guys in the resistance, they got 5 or 6 generations worth of life savings that you would have stuffed in a mattress out in coffee cans full of coins, because they turned in all their cash, but they didn't turn in the coin. And they're hoping that someday things will turn around. So when you go someplace and you need to barter for food, and you've got a coffee can full of money, and nobody knows what it is. Well, like, why should I trade for that? Well, it's contraband. Well, it's a collector's item, and who knows, we might be able to use it again someday. I mean, how do you establish a value for something when there's no money? How do you, here, have my watch for a piece of meat. How many pairs of earrings for some vegetables? What are we going to do? And the kids are faced with this very real problem of, how do we trade with one another when we don't have anything? We have to choose what values are.
Yeah. Do you bring into effect? Hold on a second. I have an echo coming through, Harvey. I have an echo coming through. All right. It's just gone now. Okay. All right. I just want to let you know I had an echo. I heard my voice twice in my head. Maybe that's my brain. My brain is loose, Harvey. Can you tighten up the screws in my head? But what do you think would happen with items such as precious metals? I mean, even the nickel has semi-precious metal, has copper and nickel in it, so it has intrinsic value. But then you have silver and gold coins, which are still in not circulation, but can be purchased. In your world, the way you depict it in your novels, would silver and gold become a medium of exchange in the secondary market?
I believe so, because how else are you going to trade for anything, right? We only have so many pairs of earrings and so many watches and so many lamps and bags and nails to trade for things, and you can trade food for food. But it's taking it back to a really primitive barter system. And as the essential services food delivery network breaks down in the second book, people get hungry, and they get hungry fast, because essential services delivers 21 meals a week per person, and that's it. And of course, just like everything else that the government sets up for us, like the post office and healthcare and things like that, they say, okay, we're going to deduct it from your paycheck, and it's going to be this much a month. But then it's more than they thought it was. And they've also eliminated food vendors. Like, you can't walk into a Target or a convenience store or a gas station and buy a bag of chips and a soda anymore. You can't do it. They're not licensed. So you can only get that stuff in your delivery once a week. And then the cost has skyrocketed. So unless you're very wealthy, you don't have extra money to buy extra food. So your pantry is not stocked. It's not like before we have a snowstorm up north and we all go to the store and we buy all the milk and the bread in the world. No, it's not like that. You might have enough food to get by. So say you get your deliveries on Thursday. Well, what if all of a sudden the food doesn't come on Thursday? Your family's hungry. And then you realize the way it's set up, in each 2 square mile area, there are 6 different days of deliveries. So you think, I get Thursday, but my neighbor is Wednesday. My neighbor got food yesterday. Now, would you go knock on the door and say, hey, we're running short because the delivery didn't come. May I borrow some food, or would you knock down the door and take it?
Yep.
And that's what
if you're hungry enough, you're going to knock down the door, I guess, I guess you're going to do that. But what happens in this world? Could you grow your own food, or is that outlawed?
Well, of course, in the places where the government can't watch you as closely, the resistance says, oh, we live pretty much like our forefathers did. We grow what we can, and we grow and raise our food, and we trade for what we can't grow. And so they've got a black market food network developed. And so they step in and work with food distributors. And it's not just a matter of there not being any food to go out. I mean, there's warehouses full of food. There's Costco's full of food because they've commandeered all the Costco's and they've collectivized them. It's all collective now. And so there's food there, but they just don't have people to distribute it. And then trucks are getting hijacked, and trucks aren't where they're supposed to be, and food can't move. And, dairy farmers are pouring out perfectly good milk because they can't get it to market, and their tanks are full. Okay, so all this is happening because the infrastructure has broken down, and it's kind of what happens when infrastructure breaks down.
Right. And of course, we have to trust the government that they have everything under control while everything is going to hell in a handbasket at the same time.
And so that's when the black market steps in,
Right.
and when things get too crazy, then they legalize the black market, and that's when the government really flips a shit. Excuse me, I'm not allowed to say that, but they.
It's okay.
We can't let people pick their own food. And the director of the safety department is like, well, how can we know the food is safe? And it's like, well, do you want people to have safe food, or do you want people to have enough food to not starve to death? And of course, they want people to have safe food. So, we're going to hold off on delivering until we can provide balanced meals.
Right.
And see, I had fun with this in the first book. In the first book, it was kind of a joke. It was like, I have an 18-year-old boy as my protagonist. And, you can't fill up an 18-year-old boy. I've had plenty of 18-year-old boys over at my house eating me out of house and home. And
right.
But with him going, the protagonist going, okay, well, there's cereal, but no milk. There's peanut butter, but no jelly. And why can't they send me stuff that goes together? And I wrote that as it's a joke that my daughter said when I was a single mom for a while because my husband had a job in another city, and I was in charge of grocery shopping for the first time in my marriage, and I had no clue what I was doing because I always worked at night teaching dance. And my daughter, one day, she's trying to pack a lunch, and she says, Mama, it's like being on an episode of Chopped around here. Could you please go to the store? I can't find anything that goes together to make my lunch.
Yeah.
And I was like, sorry, Mommy doesn't know how to do that. But I put that into the book, is that he goes to the cupboard and there's just nothing that looks like it should be a meal together. Yeah. And that's kind of how the government just gives you stuff, and you're a certain number of calories per week per person. And so, when the kids think they're going to die, they have a feast.
Right.
First
right.
book,
Yeah.
I just got my delivery yesterday. Looks like we weren't going to need this, so have whatever you want. Yeah. And so the food was kind of almost a joke, or a thing about teenagers and wanting to eat in the first book. And then in the second book, they show up at resistance headquarters, and I don't know if you can see the cover of the book, but yes. It's a diner. That's an old sign from Broken Down Diner, and I took that photo myself in Alabama. But the setting for the resistance headquarters is an old diner, and it's been running for years and years and years, and it's never shut down. And so they get food, and the food is awesome. And that's a big thing about being free, is that they can have whatever they want to eat because they're part of the black market network, and they've got awesome food there. And even when the quadrant marshals come in looking for a fugitive and they stop into this diner and they say, yeah, we heard there was this diner out here in the middle of nowhere. Nobody believed it, but here we are. And, it's a little early, but can we get breakfast? And the guy who runs the resistance is like, yeah, it's a little early, but come on in, I'll put coffee on. And he just serves them breakfast. And they're like, wow, this food is amazing. We'll tell everybody. We'll be back tomorrow. And he's like, fantastic. But it's kind of like the people who are free have the things that we like, that we value, that Americans would value, is, being able to choose whatever we want to eat. Do you want a hamburger? Do you want pancakes? Instead of, do you want what one meal was canned salmon and Thousand Island dressing on wheat?
Gosh. I'm not going to have lunch now. You know that. Tracy, could you hold on for 1 second, for 1 minute? We want to break just very quickly for station identification, and we'll be right back. Don't go away, please, okay? Folks, this is Tracy Lawson. She's the author of the book, Resist, and we're talking about the book, but really it's a I can't say the word. a novel that sort of depicts where we are today and where we may be heading. Although it's a novel, it's fiction. It's very mind provoking. I do recommend that you pick up the book "Resist" by Tracy Lawson. Hold on, we'll be back in 60 seconds. Thank you.
You're listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Political
Dystopian.
talk derived from a historical perspective. Not always palatable, but good food for thought. Pure libertarian talk with host Joe Cristiano. LibertyTalkRadio.com.
Express Test is your go-to company for on-site occupational health testing services. That's right, we said on-site. That means we will meet you at your facility for a free health and occupational safety consultation. Express Test specializes in hearing conservation, respiratory protection, and employee safety. We can help you establish viable programs tailored to your business and employee needs. For your free consultation, call 918-743-2929 or visit us at expresstest.com. That's 918-743-2929 or expresstest.com.
Ranch Acres Audiology is about caring, about getting the most out of life, about personal attention.
Sometimes helping someone with their hearing is really helping them with more than just hearing. That's the goal of my practice. That's what my goal has been for 20 years.
You're invited to attend our next free Lunch and Learn seminar. Call us today, 918-749-7711.
This isn't your typical talk radio show. This is Liberty. Liberty Talk Radio.
Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and with us today, we're very pleased to have a returning guest, Tracy Lawson. She's the author of the book Counteract, and now her new book is Resist, a dystopian novel of what we may expect in our future based on what we are doing to ourselves, and we do this to ourselves today. Tracy, thank you for holding on and being on our program.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Now, I'm going to pick. Excuse me. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna pick on you a little bit. With the presidential elections, I think anyone who's listening is probably dying of curiosity, saying, is there anyone who is running right now, any politician? But let's start with the presidential candidates of either the Republican, Democrat, or possibly, even if you want to talk about the Libertarian candidates that get absolutely no press whatsoever, except on the John Stossel's show last week. Are any of the mainstream candidates have a cure for this possible dystopian future that you're depicting?
I really cannot speak to what these people will do if they are elected, but I'm going to read a part from a review of Counteract, and this will answer that question.
Okay.
When the real dystopia arrives, it will be chosen by the public out of fear of something even worse.
Okay.
Okay, now that's from a review of my book, but I think that pretty much sums up the political situation right now, is whatever we choose, it's going to be out of fear of something even worse.
Do you think that's why we constantly harp on ISIS? There are no ISIS people in my neighborhood, no ISIS tanks or rebels in my neighborhood at all, but I have to be fearful every time I leave my house that there's going to be an ISIS attack. You think that's part of it?
Well, I think that if we believe that, I think that the threat of terrorism is real. Okay, just throw that out there. I don't want to, think I have my head in the sand, but I also think it's probably not the largest problem that we face. If we were to look at how many people die in car accidents every day, then logically none of us should be brave enough to get behind the wheel.
Right.
We are afraid to leave our houses because we might be involved in a terrorist attack. Well, that's just silly. You should be more afraid to stay at home if you have a gas stove because it could blow up. You should be more afraid to get in your swimming pool because people drown in swimming pools. Heck, people drown in buckets. So they tried to make buckets that don't hold water just so people couldn't drown in them. And, it's like, you can't live your life like that. You have to just kind of go out there and do the best you can. And when we travel, we generally hit all those spots where the terrorists have hit. And thank God, so far, we haven't been there at the same time. Yeah. But, we were in Spain not too long ago. This was years ago. And then they were showing on CNN footage of a bombing at a nightclub in Bali. And my husband said, oh my gosh, I was there 6 months ago. And I said, great, let's just keep running. because it's just hard to hit a moving target. That's our philosophy of life. We went to London 2 weeks after the bombings in 2010, when everybody was saying, you're crazy to take your child and your parents to London. What are you doing? You're going to lose your whole family. No, we're not. But they win if you give up. They win if you lock your door and stay home. They win if you don't speak out. Okay, so to me, the only way the candidates can keep us all where they want us is to show us that we have something to fear.
There are a lot of people, even prominent people, who are obtaining foreign citizenships, denying their own, U.S. citizenships, moving out of the country. And these are people typically with money and have something to lose by doing so. But they're doing it because they don't trust what's going to happen in the future, and they feel better being outside the confines of the United States. And do you think that's a realistic approach for these? I mean, they must know something. Then these are not, uneducated. These are international people, but they would prefer not to have a U.S. citizenship. They must know something that we don't know, or they must see a future that we don't depict right now, unless they're reading your book, obviously.
Yeah, and really, I don't want to live in the world that I've created in these books. But I also know, I come from a long line of patriots. I have 22 Revolutionary War soldiers in my lineage, and I have one woman patriot in my lineage. And I have to say that the history of liberty is a history of resistance. Okay, if we all just run out and shut the door behind us, how are we ever going to make things better again?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to use a healthy dose of common sense. I don't see any need. But again, I don't watch the news. I try to avoid the news. I usually mute all the candidates when they're on. They just talk because it's all the same thing. Joe, let me tell you. Can I tell you a story?
Absolutely.
Since we're here, okay. When I was in 6th grade, I ran for student council president. Okay, and we all had to develop a platform and what we thought we would do to improve the school. And there were 4 of us running for student council president. And the way they had the election set up was whoever got the most votes would be president, the second most would be vice president, what have you. So I really seriously thought about my platform. I thought, people shouldn't bully the little children on the playground, and maybe we could pick up litter, and we should have a suggestion box in the library for people who thought that they could improve the school, and maybe we should, do a teacher appreciation day. So I had this little platform, and I was ready to go. And I looked at the other candidates, and, the boy that I had a crush on was running, and, and he was really nice and cute and everything, but I thought I could beat him, and then my best friend was running, and she was prettier than I was, but I still thought that maybe I could take her. And then there was this other guy, and I didn't really know that much about him. So we got up and gave our speeches, and, my crush goes first, and, again, he's probably going to be treasurer. My best friend goes second, and she really wants to be secretary. So she's kind of hoping to get third most votes. And then this other guy goes, and he stands up and he says, elect me, and we will have free malted milks in the cafeteria every day.
He has my vote. He has my vote.
12 and under demographic, he slayed it. Okay, it wouldn't matter what I said at that point. I lost the election. I came in second. I got vice president.
Did he win?
He won.
He won. That's great. Oh, that's great. I love that story. That's great.
This story is true. Okay, but let me tell you what happened. Then he found that he could not implement his free malted milks in the cafeteria program. The cafeteria lady said, they're 25 cents a piece, and we only have them twice a week. And he couldn't make good on his campaign promise. There were rumblings amongst the constituents, and he ended up impeaching himself. He quit.
Well, at least that's honorable. At least he left. At least he owned up to it. That's a fabulous story. But that's what our politicians are doing today. The politicians are filling us with fear, and then saying the only way that you can actually survive this dystopian future that we forecast is that if you elect me. What they are doing is they are following the roadmap really basically in your book.
Pretty much. It's kind of scary. And so, that's still a catchphrase at our house, is that it's all just malts in the cafeteria. When it's something that somebody has been promised that they cannot deliver, I just say malts in the cafeteria, and we move on. But the thing is, there's always some way to take a good idea and then use it for evil.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Malts in the cafeteria every day, free. That would have been super awesome. Maybe some kids who were undernourished would have gotten a few more calories. That would, there's lots of really good reasons to apply that, but it just wasn't something that was possible.
Yeah.
Something that needed to be paid for. And
I guess I know enough people, and maybe because of the company I keep, that are like you. They're independent. I mean, they're not rebels in the fact that they're wearing black armbands and stuff like that, but they're very independent thinkers. And should the government come down with some restrictive ordinance that would restrict their liberties significantly, I don't think they're going to pay attention. I think there's going to be widespread disaffection with the entire system, and that you will see not so much rise of seats, but you will see people, large groups of people, coalescing, saying, we'll start our own state, or we'll go to a state that will reject any of this. And then you will have a breakup of the United States. For example, if the government wants to take everyone's guns away, I'm sure the state of Texas is not going to say, okay, we give in, but if I told my wife, I said, if Texas holds out and Oklahoma gives in, I said, I'm moving. They can keep the house. I'm out of here. And she agrees. But you see any of that? Because you don't see too much resistance within the book, at least the Counteract, the one that I read. There wasn't that much resistance. There was some, but not much. I see a lot more resistance today. We see resistance now on the other end, where people are not getting enough from the government and they're taking to the streets. But you don't see people taking to the streets who say there is too much government. But I think that will become hopefully overwhelming. But am I being too optimistic?
I think you're being really optimistic. That's what I was shooting for in the second. In the second book, they find that Corrine, who's my protagonist girl, she became famous in the first book in Counteract because she got on the news and at a press conference, and she made a really impassioned speech about how we don't really need to take this stuff and everybody wake up. And so she was already famous, and then she became a fugitive, and then she became wanted for murder. And so she's like this romantic figure. And so the resistance is using her in the second book to put out more messages. And the messages are like sound bites, economics, freedom, da-da-da-da-da. This is why it won't work. This is what we need to do. And there's even one where she has a conversation with another person about, well, we could get ice cream. Oh, I haven't had ice cream in forever. Well, would it be okay if I choose what flavor you get? No, I like ice cream. I want to choose for myself. Well, you might make the wrong choice. Maybe I should choose that ice cream for you. Maybe while we're at it, I should choose whether you can go to concerts or whether you can drive a car or whether, all this stuff. And she goes, well, and the other one goes, well, wait, we're in a free country. And then they kind of go, wake up, everybody. This is not the way it should be. And so my people are taking it back the other way. And when it comes down to it, they say civil disobedience is what you need to do. You need to refuse to do the things that they tell you to do. Don't hurt anybody. Don't be violent, but refuse to do the things that you disagree with. And because, God forbid we ever go more than 20 years without a revolution. And that's good old Thomas Jefferson. So, but the kids are reading up, and they're getting pretty smart.
Yeah, I wonder what would happen if any of this changes, if there is a currency collapse, because we're going so highly in debt. Our unfunded debt is approaching, or depending on which figures you use, somewhere in the $200 trillion mark, and eventually this whole system has to give way. It just can't continue going. It's going to be crushed under its own weight. And I often wonder what would happen if this does occur, if there is a currency crisis. Obviously, the government will come in and probably put more restrictions that we've ever dreamed of. But I wonder and of course the people won't have currency because we're worthless, so they're going to have to rely on someone. And since they're not self-sufficient as they were 100 years ago, or relatively self-sufficient, they're going to rely on the government. You think that could be a catalyst for what you depict in your book?
Possibly, yes. Because if you look at the history of some other countries, like Zambia, who, free markets were not encouraged and a dictator was in place, and then they had famines and the government provided food, and people didn't want to work because they were just used to getting food.
Right.
You know, and then they overthrew the dictator, and free market, and a new guy comes in, free markets, new elections, and all of a sudden it's encouraged and it's good and it's like socially acceptable to be in business. And, you know, now a country like Zambia, you know, they missed that growth and development stage. My daughter's on study abroad in South Africa right now, and she's coming back with interesting stories. But she said she saw a video of a guy who was going to Zambia, and he said, you know, to his tour guide, I want to go do something cool that is local. And the tour guide says, oh, I got the perfect thing. So he takes this guy to the mall. And so the comedian is like, oh, the mall. Okay, the mall's great. But they go to the mall to see the escalator. Okay, now, Joe, you and I, how many times have we ridden an escalator in our lives, right? But in the country of Zambia, there are only 2 escalators because they missed that development time. And so at this mall, this is like a destination. People are there with their iPhones, taking pictures. They're with their iPhones saying, Siri, how do escalators work? There are old ladies who are terrified to get on the escalator because they've never seen one before, like a toddler might be, like a grandchild might be. And there are people there on dates riding the escalator. Kindergarten, field trip, escalator. And this is mind-blowing. Yeah. You know, this is my kid who grew up in America who's 20, and she's like, but they missed that stage in development. Now, what would that do to America if all of a sudden we had this collapse, right? We'd have to come back around and we'd miss new things. And also I think a lot of our technology would disappear, a lot of the things that we take for granted now. And in this world, of course, I've taken away things like there are no apps for your phone, and they've got a bubble over the internet. So we're shut off from other countries the way China is. They can't Google things in other countries, and the internet has become PeopleNet. And the kids are like, oh yeah, we had to use it for our research at school, but you don't really use it for anything else because it wasn't useful for anything else because it was government run. Everything on it had to be censored and government approved. So when you let everybody make decisions for you about what you get, then you can't complain about what you get. So if we don't want things like that to happen to us, we need to start complaining.
Right. What about in your novels? What is happening in other countries? Has any thought or thought been given to? That's the United States, but are other countries following the same route? I mean, is there any place for people to go to get away from this dystopian future? Travel
is restricted. Flights out for pleasure are no. You have to have pass to go anywhere. It's like being in East Germany. You can't just get out and go places. And somebody says something about, oh, you know, they still use money in other countries, and somebody's like, they do. So they're very isolationist. They've become extremely isolationist. They don't interact with other countries. And the director of the OCSD says in one speech, we have spent the last 20 years walling ourselves off so that we would keep you safe. And now we find that there are terrorists within our borders. And so, you know, homegrown terrorists are everywhere. And oh my gosh. And, you know, so it's.
You know, but it's all too real, though. That's my problem. It's all too real.
Wrote it 2 years ago. It's not my fault. It's not my fault.
Yeah. But other countries, but at least in your thought process in writing this book, other countries were not of the same social structure or political structure. There were still governments that were quasi-free and can navigate the globe whichever way they wanted to. I suspect, like Canada, for example.
Yeah, well, I'm sure Hong Kong and South Korea, and they're all thriving. I'm sure they are.
Yeah, okay. All right. I guess it's either going to be Mexico or Canada, or I'm going to get a boat and just go somewhere. I don't know, you know, but I'll let you know before I do. All right, Tracy, before we go off the air, I'd like to give you the last few minutes to brief our audience as to, you know, how to get your book and anything else, any closing remarks that you do have.
Okay, awesome. My books are for sale on Amazon.com. You can find me. My name is Tracy Lawson. The first book in the series is called Counteract, and the second book in the series is called Resist. I'm going to do a quick plug for the third book, and I can't show you the cover yet because the reveal's not for a couple weeks, but the third book, Ignite.
Ah, okay.
Okay, so they're available on Amazon.com. They're available in paperback and also in ebook and in audiobook. The audiobooks of Counteract and Resist just came out, and I got to tell you, they are spectacular. I have a wonderful narrator, and she does it. She's an actress, and she does different voices for everybody. Having the story read to me was so cool. So, it's available on Audible. If you belong to Audible, you can download it. And I'm going to do a special on my ebooks today. Anybody who downloads Resist for $2.99 on Amazon, if you send me an email, I will send you a free download of Counteract. So you can read both the books and be up to speed before Ignite.
Great.
So let me tell you my email address. It is Tracy, Tracy, S as in Sam, Lawson, Lawson, @gmail.com. You can also follow me on Twitter. And if you can't remember my email address, I'm Tracy S. Lawson on Twitter. And I'm also Tracy Lawson Author on Facebook. And if you buy Resist and you would like to get the free download of Counteract, track me down in one of those places and send me a direct message and a screenshot of your receipt, and I will send you a free download of Counteract.
Can't beat that with a stick, Tracy. Thank you so much for being on our program. I do hope you will accept that invitation to return at a later date after Ignite. How about that?
I will be back. I'll be happy to see you again, Joe. It was great to be here today.
It's really great to see you again, Tracy. Thank you so much for being on our show. This is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, as my wife would say, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well. Stay tuned.